Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adogru. Today, and in the build-up to the PFA Awards this season, we'll be doing our very own Wyfutbol Awards, looking at Manager of the Year, Player of the Year, and Young Player of the Year. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Wyfutbol_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Good morning, Etches. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. I think maybe like 30 episodes ago, we tried to get a drum roll for something. I can't
Yeah.
remember what I announced. You know what? I think it's when we announced that we were on YouTube. And I think I wanted a drum roll for that. So this was another time we should have had the drum roll. And in 30 episodes' time, I've not done that. So unfortunately, there is no drum roll to announce the PFA Awards done by Wyfutbol.
That's a shame.
In cooperation with the Barclays Premier League, in cooperation with Heineken. um, we weren't able to do that, so I can only apologise to everyone listening so far.
Yeah, true. I mean, I could find one. I could probably dub one in, but so I went to the new camp like years ago, and
Yeah.
they have like a rolling drum just going on the whole time. So I might just put that in at the start, like when the start goes off, just like in the background where it's quite like monotone. But what I find mad about those things as well, like the guy just like stands towards the crowd all day, just playing the drums, doesn't watch the game at all. I just find it bizarre.
Mate, it's dedication, mate. It's like when you get this. It's like when you get the stewards at live football games that don't watch the match. They just face the crowd and say, "Mate, I know you've got a job to do, but you can also try and watch the game." They're like telling you to sit down when someone scored an overhead kick. And you're like, well, realistically, I'm going to go nuts if someone scores an overhead kick. But to answer your question, I'm well. The sun's shining. I'm going to the Barbican later. Barbican like garden. I don't actually know what it is, but I'm going there in a bit, so that'd be good. How are you? How are you doing?
Not bad. I mean, it was League One final yesterday, playoff final, which was interesting. One of our players, Sunderland player, was actually in that final, but we weren't, so that was nice.
They did the
a
Blackpool.
lone player, yeah, Blackpool won it, yeah. So
Yeah,
good for the Seasiders, to be fair. I remember when in the Premier League, man, it was so funny when they had it was that guy, the winger,
DJ Campbell. Oh
yeah,
wait, no.
Gary Taylor Fletcher playing wide
Yeah.
with
He had so much tech for someone that looks abysmal. He looks abysmal at football. Like if I came to Five Side and you brought Charlie Adams and Gary Taylor Fletcher, I would not be fearful in the slightest. He had silky feet. Did it have Andy Reid as well for a bit? Or there's not
They might have done, yeah. He looks a bit like Andy Reid, to be fair, but they had a
Andy
few.
Reid.
They had is it DJ Campbell you said? I
DJ
think they had
Campbell.
Fraser Campbell as well for a bit. I mean, I might be talking a lot of nonsense here, but I'm just naming Sunderland players. But yeah, I mean, when they came up and they just everyone loves Ian Holloway, man. You can't beat them. But yeah, I think they got relegated first season.
They got
I think.
relegated straight away, like straight away.
I was about to say, I got them mixed up there with in my mind with Hull City when they came up. Obviously, they smashed it, didn't they, with Giovanni? And then and I was thinking it might have been them, but obviously it's not. Blackpool went straight down.
Yeah, they tumbled since. I'm actually going to a stag do in Blackpool in July. So, thing is that sounds like a joke, but I actually am going to Blackpool for a stag do. So, just thought I'd share that to everyone.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah, nice. Might go to Bloomfield Road and just see what's going on there. That Bloomfield Road, that's their stadium, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. Yeah, it's good knowledge. Good knowledge.
Yeah, it's good knowledge. I'm not bad at it. So to kick things off, we're looking at Manager of the Year again. We should probably put a drum roll in, but we don't have one. So the options that we have is Pep Guardiola, David Moyes. I have a friend who's a West Ham fan who'll probably say he should win. Brendan Rodgers and Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel was a very late addition to the list.
Yeah.
So to kind of kick things off, so looking at Pep Guardiola, the main reasons for him, obviously he won the Premier League, so by default he kind of has to be there.
Yeah, definitely.
He actually won the LMA Manager of the Year awards, which no one really cares about, and he won the Carabao Cup as well, which no one cares about. So I think for him, it was a big Premier League for City to win. Obviously, wrestling it off Liverpool, and Liverpool had all of their injuries, but it is still very competitive. They had that streak where they won 16 in a row, 15 in a row when they were 8th or 9th, and just kept on winning and winning and winning and winning and winning. Cancelo's coming to his own this season, who's great, and I'm a huge Pep fan. Like people often say, like it's really easy when you have that much money to spend, but I think he's a genius. Always have done, and I did quite like the silence of just all of his enemies fuming that he managed to win the Premier League. So that is why I think he should potentially win it.
Yeah, correct. I'm just looking. I'm on the the League Managers Association website now because I'm trying to. I'm just trying to work out what they actually do because I'm just assuming it's like a trade union for managers. I think it is.
Yeah, often when they get sacked, right, they're like the first ones to say, "He deserved more time. We'll stand, we'll stand by him no matter what." And it's like, I was like, "Cheers, LMA. Yeah, see you later." Then that's often what tends to happen. But yeah, you hear very little of them. They tend to be the ones that like they were really involved with Conte because he had that issue with when Chelsea got rid of him, but then he was owed like 20 million or something from his contract.
Yeah,
So he took them
yeah,
to court, and like the LMA were involved with that because even though he was no longer in England, he was still like a manager of an English team at that time. So yeah, I don't know what they do, but I think they do get involved in a few things. I think
yeah.
that,
True,
I
true.
think the stats against Guardiola is obviously the Champions League run. All of his enemies have popped out the woodwork, being like he overthought the
Yeah.
game. Overthought is quite an ambiguous word because what does that mean? People have said
Very
he didn't.
reactionary. Yeah, very hindsight.
Yeah, exactly. People say, oh, he didn't pick Rodri and he didn't pick Cancelo. No, Fernandinho, sorry.
One thing that will go against Pep, and to an extent, should it go against Pep? Should it go against any manager? Is the money spent in the league
Yeah,
generally?
yeah, true.
Should that be a thing? Should it be a thing? Should we, when we look at this, do we look at Player Manager of the Year? Do we actually take them sort of things into account? And it's an open question, really. Like someone like Moyes, obviously, when you look at his objectives for the season, the cash he has to use to spend, the squad he has, the personnel. When you're looking at objectives for a season, obviously the goalposts are different for these managers. But should it go against Pep that over his tenure? I mean, I think the stat was like 832 million since he joined. It's a lot. It's a lot of money. But interestingly, with City, they've not actually broke a record. They've not actually like spent a Mbappe or Neymar size amount, even though in theory it doesn't really matter too much. If you're spending 830 million, you've still spent 830 million, and that
Mm,
is a large reason why you are now Premier League winners. But should we look down on the coach? If you've got the cash there, if you become you become Man City manager tomorrow,
yep,
and they say, okay, Etches, we're going to give you 100 million to spend,
yep.
or what we'll do is we won't give you that money to spend just in case the press kick off. What are you going to do?
I
You're
think
going to
for
take the money.
I think for me, because I'm a naturally gifted manager, I would nurture the academy,
Ah,
and
right.
then
Yeah.
I'd nurture the
Sorry.
academy, and then we would have a team filled of under 23 players that go on to create a dynasty where we win the Champions League and league in consecutive seasons for like, the next 8 or 7 years.
Yeah. No,
That's what
no,
probably
very
happen.
noble. Very
No,
noble.
but
But no.
I think there is an element. I get what you mean, right? When you have loads of money to spend and you assemble strong squads, the expectations are a lot higher. However, I always say the type of players that you're buying for that money are harder to manage. At a
Mm,
West Ham, Declan Rice will play all the time, and that should be the case because he's very good,
yeah.
as should some other players in their team as well, like Antonio when he's fit. The difference is that West Ham don't have the depth, quality, or the ego that players at Man City have, and that is very difficult to manage. I remember Inter Milan after Mourinho, Benitez came in and really struggled because what Mourinho managed to do at that time was really cultivate harmony within that squad. I think
Yeah.
Eto famously said, I only play wing for Jose Mourinho. He used to play him left wing or right wing for a period of time. And he said, I'd only do that for Jose Mourinho. And that's the point I'm trying to get across where
Mm,
when you assemble these really strong squads, there is a huge underrated skill of trying to get them singing off the same hymn sheet.
yeah. Agreed.
Because you
Yeah.
could be Laporte now. Laporte cost 50 something million pounds from Atletico Bilbao. He could just kick
Hmm.
it, be like, yeah, I'm unhappy. He could leak it to the press. He could, there'd be murmurs that he wants to leave. There are murmurs he's unhappy, but he can make a big deal of it. Raheem Sterling can't be particularly happy with his game time. Riyad Mahrez has, to be fair, started a lot more this season. But again, because of the rotation at City, there are a lot of established international players that don't play often enough. And they could then just decide to kick off, but they don't because I think Guardiola and City really drive in this sense of trying to do it all together, if that makes sense.
But it's an interesting discussion, manager of the year, I think, because there's always. I mean, this year we don't really have it, but there's usually like a relegation specialist in the mix. So
Yeah.
if Sam Allardyce had turned up at West Brom to the Hawthorns and had kept them up, he would have surely been on this list.
Hmm.
He's not because they got relegated.
Yeah.
But it's then how do you compare that kind of Allardyce with that Guardiola? I mean, we discussed it in our Allardyce pod. Actually, we discussed, if you swapped positions or more, you give Pep the West Brom job, would he just naturally turn it around and they'd finish 15th? Not necessarily because it's a completely different style of management, like you said.
Yeah.
Like his skill and his experience is actually getting a team of, you know, a team of like superstars with egos and getting them singing off the same hymn sheet, which is a great skill. Allardyce comes into a team and has to turn a team round who have been struggling, who have been used to losing, getting that mindset that they're no longer a losing team, but actually they start winning games, and that's a very different thing to do. So the whole job, if you take away the fact that Allardyce came in mid-season, which does have an effect, and it's arguably with Tuchel as well. How do you separate out the managers that came in like Jan, Feb, with the managers that have been there all season? It's obviously the
Yeah.
full gig, the full job.
That's
But how do you compare these two managers? And it's arguably the same here with Moyes. Like Moyes wasn't in the relegation scrap; he did it excellently, and they finished in Europe. But how do you compare that with Pep, because they've completely different objectives? But I mean, for that reason, I mean, in theory, I mean, if it was me, and we are discussing this today, and I am on this podcast, so if it was me,
Yeah.
I'd possibly go with Moyes if I was going through this list, because his task is so much taller. Like the players that he has compared to, I mean, they've got a good squad, but the players that they have compared to City and some of the results they've had, and they finished above, they finished above Arsenal, Spurs, Everton, three teams that
Spend a
should
lot of
be.
money.
They have spent money, yeah, and that, again, that goes back to our argument before. Like, do we take that away from Moyes because they spent money? But then it's all linked, isn't it? It's all
Yeah.
linked to just money spent.
I think we come into to the next point of David Moyes generally. I think, we've mentioned the flaws of Klopp, Guardiola. I
Oh
mean, David
yeah.
Moyes, he's done really well to get in Europe for the first time. Excellent recruitment, because West Ham somehow managed this whole season with pretty much one striker, with
Mm,
Antonio kind of playing there. I know that they obviously got Benarama and Yarmolenko kind of, but they did a lot of it with one striker at the helm, which is very impressive. And you're right. I think he has had an exceptional season. A manager had written off previously. I thought after Sociedad, he was away from
mm,
football for a time, and I just thought he was the end. You get managers. I talk about all the time with manager cycles. Didn't think he could do it, but he's done really, really well, and he won't be my pick because I think we've spoke a bit about the top two. We're going to go straight to the third man who I think would win it for me is Brendan Rodgers.
mm.
And Brendan Rodgers will win it for me because he's guided Leicester to Europa League again, but he's made them a top four contender. And I think that's really undervalued. We're looking at the
Yeah.
top six. We did the Leicester pod, right, where all the top six become top seven. And we know that Leicester recruit very well. They had brilliant recruitment under Puel and Craig Shakespeare and were 12th in the league or 10th in the league, and they were not playing very well.
Mm,
So, I know that squad's changed since then they brought other players, but the fundamentals and the basics at Leicester have always been there, right? So it's not so much that, they're doing really well because they have a really good setup. They're doing well because of that and because Brendan Rodgers has done a brilliant job. I mean, they're coming in now where they're managing to convince players like Yuri Tillmans when he signed last
mm,
year to play there. Yuri Tillmans, it was, you had facts about him when he was 16, 17 at Anderlecht that he was going to be a boy wonder. And he's
mm.
opted to come to England and stay at Leicester. I think that's testament to something which is always highlighted by Brendan Rodgers, which is his man management. From his time at Liverpool, from his time at Celtic, his man management style has always been really, really good. They play good football. Their squad's quite thin. I think they need to be
Yeah.
backed more in the market with certain. An example is when Arsenal played them, we won 3-1, but we had both played on the Thursday. So they got knocked out by Slavia Prague. I think we'd beaten Olympiacos. I can't remember who we beat, maybe Olympiacos or someone. We fielded a team that had Willian, Pepe, Lacazette, Emil Smith Rowe, Louise, Cedric, etc. Most of those players didn't play on the Thursday. Leicester playing people like Daniel Amati, Luke Thomas.
Yeah.
The depth wasn't there because obviously their squad's a lot thinner. Their first 11's pretty good, but I think it's really undervalued what he's done to bring Leicester to where they are, culminating it with a title, obviously winning the FA Cup. For me, there's no real negative against him. The only negative is the fact that they didn't come top four, but that's quite harsh. So I think he would get the nod for me.
I think a lot of people would have seen him come in and thought that's a clever move, but it could go wrong, and it's went so right for them.
Yeah,
But
brilliantly.
obviously, yeah, this is kind of a crunch kind of time for them now, isn't it? Like, I mean, they've had this. I mean, I mentioned it on the Leicester pod we did. They've had these situations before where they've got, obviously when they won the Premier League, they got players picked off, and then even like last summer when Chilwell went, every summer, or even the summer before with Maguire, I think that was the summer before. Every summer, it's like one player is getting targeted. Like this
Yeah.
year, it'll be Tielemans, and it's like how do they react to that every time? And eventually, it might get to a point where they sell Tielemans, for example, and don't replace well.
and then they start to struggle.
Eventually it might go wrong. Yeah, that's what we discussed last time.
Yeah,
So
no,
I
I
wonder
agree.
if it's a really important summer again for Leicester, because the more of these summers they get right, because they have got them right, haven't they? They've sold players. They sold Maguire and brought in Soyuncu and they brought in Fofana. I mean, in theory, who'd you rather have, them two players or Harry Maguire? Arguably the former, because they've been exceptional signings. So if they get another summer right, I'll keep on getting them right. Sorry, the more likely they are to cement themselves in top four.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think the final manager is Tuchel. Obviously, we need to be on to probably the next topic, but
Mm.
Tuchel's, I think his lure has guided Chelsea to top four Champions League winner. I do think you can't really win it coming in half the season in. I think he was, as I said, the disclaimer is
Yeah,
he was a very late addition. Had the season been August onwards, I think he could have won it, but I just think half a season, if you ended the season in December, to fair, City would have still won it, but the table would have looked very different. And the same kind of applies to the second half, right? Tuchel comes in, they've won this brilliant run and played really, really well. But, if we extended it to August, would we have seen the same result overall?
yeah,
Maybe,
yeah,
but you don't know. So I think he needed probably a bit more time to kind of be there. And also with Chelsea as well, Chelsea are playing as they should be. So they underperformed, in my opinion, from Lampard with the players that they bought. I know it takes a while for them to settle, but when you look at the talent that they do have, this is where Chelsea should roughly be: Champions League, competing for the actual honour itself. It shouldn't be like, oh, Tuchel came sixth, let's applaud him, and he got to the Champions
mm,
League last 16. The squad that Chelsea have should actually be where they are anyway. So is he really overachieving, or was it previously under Lampard they were perhaps underachieving slightly, and that's what they've done now? They've just basically reversed that.
yeah. True, and I was fine with football as well. I mean, it happens with all sport, but like, it's just mad to think like the margins that are included. So if you think, yeah, we're talking about Tuchel guiding them to fourth, but they lost that last game against
Yeah, they
Villa,
did. They
and
did.
actually the only reason they finished, but to extent, I mean, not the only reason, they played 38 games and did
Yeah.
amassed the points they did, but if Leicester hadn't lost to Spurs, or if they'd won that game, they were leading twice, they would have finished fifth, and then we're having a very different conversation. It's just that the margins are so thin, and I mean, in theory, Chelsea losing that game, they could have finished fifth. And if they finished fifth and lost the Champions League final, then their season becomes very different, doesn't it? I mean, I know that's very high. I know that's very easy to say, but it is to an extent. But
Yeah, I don't disagree with that one. I think moving on to the next one, we've got Player of the Year. It's a tough one. I think if you look at the candidates we've gone for Bruno Fernandes, or Bruno Fernandes, if you have the Portuguese accent like me, Ruben Dias, Mo Salah, and Harry Kane. I think looking them as a collective, as a four, Son would have run away with it. He would have run away with it from, I think, August to November, October time. So no, August. Yeah, it's about the first 3 months of the season. Kane, I would say, even a bit further than that, kind of emerged, and he. It's tough because I think it's one of those years where I don't think anyone's been exceptional throughout the whole season. Centre backs are very hard to judge. So Diaz
yeah, true,
Diaz has
very
been
true.
Diaz has been very good. So if you looked at Bruno Fernandes, he's got 18 Prem goals, 12 assists, 28 goals, and 18 assists in all comps, which is mad numbers for a midfielder. When he doesn't play, which is rare, United don't tick. When you close him down, which has happened in big games, which is one of his negatives to me, United don't win. Like they just don't.
Mm,
They don't win, nor do they play well, because he is so important. He's a leader off the pitch. He's had an exceptional year again. I think the only things holding him back is there have been big moments for United this season: Europa League final, FA Cup against Leicester, where I felt he was subdued and he needed to step up. He didn't, and United lost because he's so influential. Um,
yeah,
he also has the hoodoo as well. I know he did quite well against, was it Liverpool? I have watched a lot of Bruno in the big games against the big six, and he has been quite quiet. I know
mm,
United collectively haven't had the most brilliant of records in those games, apart from when they smashed Tottenham, obviously 6-1 or whatever it was.
yeah,
But he tends to be quite quiet. That's one of the negatives I'd have for him, rather than like a Kane or Vardy in particular, who love playing against the bigger teams. They always seem to score. They always seem to be involved. So that's kind of a negative for him, for me, to not win it. And he wasn't my choice.
as you said, he's so influential in that system. So that when you do nullify Fernandez, you seem to nullify United as a whole. I mean, but as you said, his numbers from midfield are absolutely outstanding. Like, you can't. It's almost incomparable with the other players within the league.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think moving on to Ruben Diaz, He's in it because City have conceded the fewest goals in the Prem. You know, he's a leader and organizer. He's very English. I think that Ruben Diaz, I
John
think he's,
Terry.
I think he's good. I just think I see a lot of Van Dijk comparisons. I disagree with that, and I think he's very good. I think there are certain things that English fans love about Diaz, which is
Yeah.
why he's more hyped than he is. So stuff like, oh, he throws his body into all
Yeah.
shots. Oh yeah, like he's shouting on the pitch. It's like it's great. There are some fantastic leaders in this game that don't do that. For example, you know, there are some players that are extremely influential off the pitch, but on the pitch they may be quieter, more reserved characters. Just because someone is screaming at you to clear the fucking ball doesn't
Mm.
mean you're any more of a leader than someone else that leads by example. For
Yeah.
example, when I watched the Tottenham documentary, I was shocked at how vocal Hugo Lloris is away from the pitch. So obviously
Yeah.
keepers are generally vocal, but Lloris as captain has a lot of speeches, a lot of talks, a lot of chats to the players, which is something I don't see because I'm not in the changing room.
Yeah.
I think Diaz's positive is also his negative. Where I think we do overvalue some of the stuff that he does purely because we see it as old school English defending. Having said that, though, he's galvanised the City defence. He's galvanised players who maybe before on bad bits of form, in particular John Stones. City collectively have been more solid, but then his flaw is that down to the man or the system? Centre backs are very hard to judge because they play part of a system, right? Now you could put Van Dijk. Van Dijk would improve West Brom's defence for sure, but if they're collectively, if they can't play a high line together, then they're still going to concede goals. If they can't play
Yeah. True.
if they can't play an offside line, then they'll be terrible. It's like if I play next to Van Dijk, they're still going to concede loads of goals because I can't play football.
Mm.
So it's like it doesn't just because you throw back. That's the thing with centre backs, right? Is it the system or is it the player? It's very hard to judge, I think, with defenders in particular because
Yeah. True.
there's such a unit. You know, you can't just have one defender who's outstanding, the rest are terrible because it won't work. So that's kind of the flaw with Ruben Diaz. What were your thoughts on him?
Well, I completely agree with that particularly. I mean, we've had a discussion before with friends about can you kind of just compare like for like, player for player? So can you say, on FIFA, you got an
Yeah.
85 overall defender or an 88, and as far as FIFA is concerned, that 88 is better, even though the attributes are different. In theory, their overall rating is still higher, so therefore they're a better player. But can you actually do that in reality, or do you have to take consideration
Yeah.
system? And I think it's centre half that's even more prominent because you think David Alaba plays, or I mean he's moved to Real now, hasn't he? But when he was at Bayern, he played a lot of his games at centre back, like a left centre back. We've seen Kyle Walker play right centre back for England. Like they're very, very different roles than Ruben Diaz, for example. Ruben Diaz reminds me of Nemanja Vidic, is who I would say is the most direct comparison there. I mean, I'm going to get a lot of hate if I say this, but Stones and Stones and Diaz is almost a bit like Ferdinand and Vidic. I know a lot of people might say chuck their phone on the floor now and start stamping on top of it in rage because they were the kind of famous centre half pairing of the Premier League, the most famous. But it is kind of apt because Stones is that kind of ball playing defender. So is Ferdinand. Vidic is that kind of put your head in the line, John Terry style player that Ruben Diaz is. And they work so well together, them sort of players, because you do, particularly in a Pep team, you need to have a player that can play with his feet. And I mean, Diaz possibly can, and is probably a very good footballer, but typically you need to have a player who's a bit quicker, quicker with his feet to play on the cover, whilst someone like Diaz is the kind of stopper, for using football
Exactly.
manager terminology. But yeah, you're completely right. I mean, can you compare like for like? Can you even compare Stones and Diaz because they're so different, but and they play different roles. But just because they both play centre back doesn't mean they're in the same position. Do you know what I mean?
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. So yeah, I think yes, it's a tough one. DS didn't get it for me. We're going to the next one. I just think it's more the system rather than the man, but I think the man has contributed to the system. The next one's Mo Salah, kind of last on the list, but isn't last. You know, you've got 22 goals, 5 assists. He's always been there when Liverpool have needed him. I think Mane's been poor in parts of the season. Firmino's not looked the same this year. Trent's come under criticism. Fabinho's been very good, but has often had to play centre back and still been very
Yeah.
good and has been brilliant back in midfield. But I think if I was to say Salah, Fabinho, I'd say Robertson. I don't watch Liverpool all the time, but I'd say they're the only 3 players I would say for the majority of the season have played quite well. They've obviously had bits where they haven't because the team has generally struggled with injuries in defence and the midfield makeup, and they finished the season quite strongly. So Salah has to be in there by being second on goals and being such a threat going forward. But the negative is that when you have such high standards as he does, hasn't had a good season. He's had a good season with the situation at Liverpool, but he hasn't collectively had his best season. Therefore, because the standards are so high, I don't think he can actually win, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
the league is too strong for Salah to have, let's say, a 7 out of 10, 6.5, 10 out of season and win Player of the Year. I think it's just one of those years where no one has truly been exceptional for the whole season, either because they're masked by the quality of their team, i.e., the team has performed poorly, so it reflects poorly on the player, or the individual has played quite well, but he hasn't really done a lot. So either they've won nothing, which is what we're going to talk about with Kane coming up.
I mean, I almost feel like I don't know who I'm going to pick, but
Yeah, it's
I think
difficult.
I think I would go Kane because seventh place and winning winning the assist tally as well. I think it's just an exceptional feat.
I think it's
And
mad.
so,
So fair play to
yeah.
Kane. I would say with Kane as well. Don't really need to go into him too much detail. I just think he's been the main hub for Tottenham. Winning both, first player to do so is mad. The team has been shit. In short, I don't need to go into details as to why. They've just not been very good. And I think Kane is a deserving winner. I actually think Diaz might win it because I think there's like this campaign for him to win it. But I
Yeah,
think
people like defenders winning them sort of things, don't they?
but I think it should go to Kane. It's quite close. I think it'll be a close one. If they release the data, they never release the data. I would say if whoever wins will win by a small margin between Kane and Diaz. Just because Kane, Englishman, won both awards. Diaz, obviously, title-winning player. De Bruyne probably hasn't done enough for City. Well, he has and he hasn't. So I'd probably say they'd be the two. So you sorry, go for it.
PFA is voted by the players, isn't it? I always wonder if do you reckon it makes a difference if he's English? Not because like Raheem Sterling or someone like that is going to think, oh, I can't vote for the Englishman. But like, do you think it makes a difference that they're more likely to know Kane and to be?
Yep, definitely.
Do you think it makes a difference?
Yeah, I read a left article, and apparently that's a massive thing, like voting for teammates and also voting for people that you know.
Yeah.
Like if I play in England for 10 years compared to Diaz for 1 year, there'd be loads of random players that I know. And also academy-wise as well. Like, okay, let's say I'm a star at City, but I came through at Watford, and then I was playing under 16 ball for England with 3 guys at Man United who I play in the national team with. And then because those 3 guys at Man United, I know Bruno Fernandes because I met him through him. So me and Bruno Fernandes kind of get on. Do you know what I mean? It's like a massive network. So like, I do think for someone like Kane, he's been here for a long time, been an elite bagsman for a long time. There are more. If Kane could, you know, when they have the little infographic bio underneath someone's name, so like Premier League winner ×3, whatever, Kane's would say elite bagsman.
Fair.
That's what I'd say. Because so that's what I put for him. But yeah, I think there is definitely a leniency for English players because of, you know, the general relationships they have with others. But moving on to our final topic, this has been quite interesting actually doing this, is the Young Player of the Year awards. So we've got the King. Can play if you need someone to do back windows, you need someone to mow your lawn, if you need someone to be a chauffeur, doctor, surgeon, lawyer, swimming coach, football coach, get Bukayo Saka because he can do it all. Left back, guy can play left back, right back. So for Arsenal, I've seen him play right back, left wing, right wing. I've seen him play in the 10 role, and I've seen him play as an 8.
Is that because Saka's very good or because Arsenal are terrible?
Oh, a mixture of both. I think he's very versatile. When we played him at 8, that was the interesting one for me because I didn't know he could do that. But sorry, so instead of going into Saka, I could talk about Saka for 2 hours. We've got Bukayo Saka for Arsenal, Phil Foden, the golden boy for City, and Ruben Diaz is in it again because he's under 23, so he has to be in it. He won't win it because I've said he can't. So he's not going to win. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin obviously got 16 goals in 33 games. So we'll start from the bottom up. We'll go Calvert-Lewin first. He is an ugly footballer. Not in terms of aesthetics. I think he scored 9 headers this year, and he's just a nuisance. You know, you get strikers, especially someone like him, who's quite tall, great in the air and quick. He's just a nuisance. Like the way he plays, like his link-up play isn't brilliant. It's good, but he's just a nuisance. Where he gets his goals, they're not brilliant goals, but they're key goals. He's putting his head where players want to put their heads. He's in the positions where he needs to be to score goals. And that actually is a really underrated skill, I think, for footballers generally. And his return this year has been brilliant. In the England squad, England international. he's managed to get off the mark there as well.
Mm.
And I think he's deserving of a spot on here. He's probably the weakest of the three because, again, it's that club issue where Everton came 10th. They have spent quite a bit of money. They were doing quite well earlier on in the season, so they really tailed off. They were in the top 4 or 5 for a bit. So I think, unfortunately, he's masked by that poor season. And because he's not a YouTube baller,
He's not a
i.e.,
match of the day player.
yeah,
Yeah, I
he's
agree.
not a YouTube
Yeah.
baller where like you see a goal and it's a decent header, but when you want to see YouTube goals and you type in Thierry Henry, you think, wow, like these are great goals, or Olivier Giroud, oh wow, great goals. But when you actually watch, but when
Olivier Giroud.
Giroud's got
I can't be. Yeah, he does. To be fair,
Giroud's highlight reel makes him look like one of the greatest footballers of all time.
Yeah, I love how you. Yeah, but so does Craig Gardner's. I
Yeah,
know people.
Craig Gardner
Liz,
had an
Liz,
absolute rocket.
people used to say that to me. Used to go because he used to play for Sunderland. He's like, he used to go, "Oh, Craig Gardner's amazing, isn't he?" I was like, "Well, he's not that good. He's just that he's a match of the day He's a match of the day player. He'd score a screamer like twice a season, and then obviously because no one watches Sunderland, they think he's the best player in the world."
You're not wrong. So I think that's kind of the flaw for Calvert Lewin is he hasn't had an exceptional enough season in a team that's underperformed. So he would be the drawback for
Mm.
that. We're not going to talk about DS again. I think the only
Yeah,
point about DS is that they should change it to under 21 players instead of under 23 when the season
yeah.
starts. Because I think DS has got
Halfway through a player's career, man. Like, you
yeah,
come through at 17. You've been playing for 6 years.
yeah,
So how are you a young player?
yeah. I just think DS is I don't know. I think he needs to come out of that one. So we won't talk about him again. Phil Foden is an interesting one, and I have this take on Phil Foden. His best performances have come in the Champions League, and
Yeah.
that masks people's opinions of him in the Prem. I think Phil Foden's been very good. He's got 18 goals in all comps in 56 games with City, which is a lot of games. I just think that he has had his best games this year. I'm not saying someone's going to say, "Oh, he's played well in the league." I'm not saying he hasn't. I just think that we're mesmerised by the Dortmund performances, the PSG performances,
Yeah.
some of the group games, and we translate that to the Prem when they are different awards. So one of them is the Premier League, PFA. One is the Champions League, but because the Champions League is so big, they kind of merge together.
Yeah.
If I
No, yeah, agreed.
if I was to think of his exceptional league performances, like there will be some.
Liverpool away, the goal at Liverpool. But even then, like, I mean, he played well then. I know what you mean. There's also this thing that because Foden is arguably the most exciting English talent, there's just a lot of people willing him on,
Yeah,
wanting him to be
yeah,
this
that's true.
person that perhaps so trying to almost create this player that almost to an extent it does exist because he's an exceptional footballer. I mean, I think people love to rave about Foden because he seems to have that mentality and he has that technique that. So like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, like you said, he's not a YouTube footballer. He is very functional. Kane is like that, but it's just exceptionally good. Kane doesn't do tricks. Kane doesn't do things that other people can't, but he does. He just does the things he's supposed to do better than almost anyone in the world, and therefore he's a world class footballer. And Calvert-Lewin is that kind of mold, but just not as good. Foden is the sort of player that can do things that other players can't, and that's why, particularly for an English player, he gets kind of propelled forward in opinion. But if you actually took away the fact that he's 19 or he's 20 years old now, I think English, and his prodigy, if you took all that away, would fans and pundits actually be raving as much about him? I don't think they would be. If he was Portuguese, came in and had the same season, I don't think he'd be getting the same hype. I think it's just because he is English. We're in a tournament year as well,
Yeah.
and just hysteria around it. Which I get caught up in as well because I'm a massive England fan. I absolutely love Foden and all this. I get caught up in that as well. So you've got to kind of just like remember for a second that you are biased for that reason. You've got to kind of just think, well, actually, there's other players doing similar things that aren't getting the hype because they're not the English golden boy.
No, I completely agree. I think the last one, it's a tough one. I think Phil Foden will probably win it for me, but I think that because Arsenal, so it's Bukayo Saka's problem is again what we've spoken about for countless players on this list, is played very, very well, most goals by any under 21 player in the league, I believe. Played a pivotal role for Arsenal, but Arsenal have been crap. So again,
Yeah,
his issue is like, yeah, like he's great, but he he's just it's just one of those things where Arsenal just haven't been good enough. Therefore,
but is that in his favour or is that against him? So I mean, it's an interesting one. So is someone performing well like Kane in a team that hasn't performed well like Tottenham better for doing that in that side, or is the fact that they didn't do very well a signal that even themselves individually weren't as good as we think they are. If you get what I mean.
Yeah,
So,
I get what you mean. I just think it's one of them where like he's just not. You need to have both, right? Where you've had that great season, I think the team needs to do well. I think it does impact. Yeah, obviously it does highlight if a team are all my level and you're Bukayo Saka, you look exceptional. But then also if a team comes 20th and you get relegated, people are like, oh well, big fish, small ponds, and that's kind of why I'd have to give it to Phil Foden on that one. I think. What are your thoughts?
At the start of the season, if we were talking about this, if we say we did like a mid-season prediction for the Player of the Year award, young player, we'd be saying Calvert-Lewin if he said at Christmas, I think. But now, obviously, that second half of the season has not been as fruitful. And Foden, to be fair, I mean, again, almost like anti what I said before, or like the discussion where you talk about Saka and say, "Oh, does it make him a better player because he plays in an arguably a worse team and therefore still performs?" However, it's easier to get in that side because
100%.
it's not doing as well. Whereas if you're Foden, you've managed to break into a team that is actually the best in the league in terms of domestic performance, and won the Champions League. So in that, not only is that barrier to entry in that team harder, but then you've also got to stay in there and then perform. Particularly under a coach like Guardiola, who, as much as I think he seems to really want to will Foden on to be this next like almost like Messi style protege, he would still cull him if it wasn't going well. Like he's the sort of manager he would cull a player over the greater good. So
very much so.
There is that point as well.
No, I do agree with that, and I think that's pretty much it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good time to wrap up. I think we've it's been a long one today, but yeah, thank you so much for pulling that list together, Ches. It was an interesting discussion, and let's just wrap up. Then I went Moyes, you went Rodgers,
double Kane for the next one,
double Kane, and then double Foden.
Yeah, double Foden. Sorry, Bukayo Saka. Yeah, probably have to go with Foden for the last one as well.
Yeah, he'll be devastated. So I'll break the news. All right, cheers, mate. Thank you so much, and yeah, we'll see you all next time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.